Hello, it's a Friday. We meet again for drinks, guys. Surprise, surprise to all of you who were expecting George or Rufaro, because sometimes he comes to anchor. I'm the man in charge. How are you guys?
No, we're doing very well.
Yeah, you should tell us a little bit more about your trip. You've been away
Well, what
to
can I
better
say?
parts of the world.
There are parts of the world where, water comes out of taps and there's electricity all the time and there are trains that run on time. It's just a pleasure to.
Sounds like heaven.
Clearly, he was having a good time. So anyway, before we get into it today, let's just acknowledge there's something different. You can see, guys, we have got a sponsor for this season 5. So we want to thank Nyarazo for coming on board. Sawiram Kuru. So this whole place is now it's Sawiram Kuru all over. So we want just to thank them for what they've done. I think if our cameras were to go to the guest section, the viewers could have seen how beautiful it is. We'll show it for the next episodes, but it's good to have company.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Nyati. Cheers to you.
Yeah,
and your
fantastic. Yeah, and very encouraging.
It is. It is.
So you guys are drinking out of branded
yes,
mugs.
Yeah.
Is there anything interesting going on in there, or it's the
Somebody's
usual?
actually listening to us and decided that we should have coffee mugs and lattes going, and I'm enjoying mine. Thank you very much for making it, Rufaro. I don't know about his. Anyway, you can go ahead. He will tell us how.
Well, I've got water in my mug and something more interesting as always. Are you drinking a latte like Tinashe as well, or?
It's supposed to be a latte,
but
obviously.
he's drinking sugar and water.
Yeah, look, I take mine sugar, so.
Yeah, Tinashe insisted the sugar be removed from the set, but apparently you put 5 teaspoons of sugar in yours.
I love lots of sugar, so I could have even put more than that.
Let's hope those are the only sweet things you like.
Oh, okay, guys, let's get on with the show. And Rufaro, what are you drinking?
Okay, so I'm as always, this side of the bar has the more interesting beverages, and unfortunately there's nobody on set to share it with me. It's an American rye whiskey. It's called 1776 from a distillery called James Pepper, and I thought it would be appropriate since it was July 4th on Monday to drink something American and maybe reflect on their journey. They were also a British colony 246 years ago, and they seem to have done okay, or better than okay.
Well, they became a superpower.
And Zimbabwe is also a former British colony, and we've had 42 years of independence. What can we learn from the Americans and their journey and how it's different from ours?
Well, Zambia was also a colony, remember. So we do have former colonies that have done very well and others that have done not so well. And I think Zimbabwe really is in the category of the latter, primarily because we've created our own problems. So whereas America went about just understanding, if you look at the founding fathers, the society that they wanted to create, and they said, it's the Federal Papers clearly articulate that it was a mixture of an Athenian and a Roman democracy, that they were engaged in those ideas, and that's the society that they tried to create. And I think capitalism, they benefited quite significantly from capitalism. So if you look at the Chinese Empire, which at some point was quite dominating in world economy, that was over 1,000 years, right? Whereas America did it in just 100 years. And credit really to capitalism. And, clearly shows us what capitalism can do. And yeah, that's my view.
But our experience is similar. I'm just looking at a situation where, or maybe you've made reference to Zambia and also to the Americans. In our case, I think the buzzword was the whole issue about land and how even the liberation war was fought on the mantra of land. Could you say maybe even the other colonies also had land was such an emotional issue? And why was it different for us? Because that seems to be the genesis of our problems. Anyway, just to digress, I'll give you like 2 minutes to just comment about that. That maybe one would say our situation was unique, and was it really unique? How is it that maybe the other colonies?
There's absolutely nothing unique. I think land disputes have been part of us since time immemorial. An interesting anecdote that people might be interested in, well, I find it very interesting, you might find it interesting, is that economics is birthed by a chap called Hesiod, who was a contemporary of Homer, and he produced this poem called...
So that's circa
Working
2,000 years
Days.
ago?
No, more than 2,000 years ago, closer to 3,000 years ago. In his poem, he correctly identified the problem that economics was trying to solve, which is a problem which was discovered in agriculture, which was scarcity, that we had all these needs and very few resources to meet those needs.
Okay.
And he termed, that's where the idea of scarcity comes from. And it's been with us for so many years. So if you think about it, the issue of, in fact, in that poem, it's quite interesting. There is a land dispute,
Okay.
right? But it's resolved. And the manner in which it was resolved is showing us that enterprise, that's without the resource, but by being enterprising, you can do better than people with the resource. And I think De Soto really encapsulates what happened in Latin America around the land issue and land disputes. And it's dead capital. You know, if you don't utilize the land, if you don't give title deeds to the land, then it's dead capital. And that's something that the Americans, I think, discovered right at the get-go. But America's development did not come from land. It came from institutions. So that's why I say if you read the Federal Papers, you can see that they were gripped
It's the Federalist Papers, by the way.
the Federalist Papers. They were gripped with the idea of what a democracy should look like, what a market system should look like, what an Athenian and what a Roman democracy looks like, and create their own particular niche. And this is what they created, and this is where we are. So I believe that the market system, wherever it's been embraced, has shown to be a far superior economic development program and ideology than the opposite, which is socialism. We've seen what socialism has done right across society. And I think that those are the differences that I would attribute it. It doesn't matter whether it's land.
I'm going to push back a little bit. When he characterizes it as a mixture of Roman and Athenian democracy, I feel like it needs to be put into proper context, because I find that an overly romantic picture. When the founding fathers set up or declared independence, in as much as they wrote this very lofty declaration and constitution, only propertied men could vote. Women couldn't vote until 1920. Black people couldn't vote until the 1960s.
66, yeah.
So it was basically, and their gripe didn't really have much to do with land, because they were also settlers. For them, the issue was taxation without representation. But over the years, obviously, it evolved to where it is today. And, so it wasn't, they used very colorful, inspiring language in 1776, but it took them more than 200 years to start trying to seriously live by those ideals. But, so I think from a Zimbabwean perspective, since we only got independent in 1980, we don't have to go through that cycle that they went through.
Can I be allowed to push back as well?
Yeah.
I think ideals by their very nature are romantic. The idea of the Enlightenment, and this is part of the development of the America developed during philosophical revolution around the Enlightenment. And I think in itself, it's a romantic notion. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with being romantic. And ideals are, in their very essence, romantic. But it's just what we strive towards. So you're quite right that there are certain people that could not vote, that were did not have the franchise, but it doesn't mean that the ideal did not include them or did not understand, because remember, it actually says all persons. Now it then became all men. Yeah. Hey, I'm being
you're being politically correct.
but in the Zim
So it says-
in the Zim context,
maybe let me make the point. It says all men, right?
Okay.
That it excluded certain men does not mean that it deviated from the
ideal,
origin. The origin. And if you remember what Martin Luther King actually says in the 60s, that his idea was America has forgotten its founding fathers' ideals, that all men are created equal, right? And that black people are equal. So I think that the founding fathers were quite right in what they deemed to be the ideal. And yes, you are right, it was romantic, but ideals by their very nature are romantic. And sometimes maybe that's what we're not getting in Zimbabwe, that we have, we're no longer attuned to the romantic ideals of what society is. You might find this interesting. Yeah? I picked up a book, Ray Dalio, which is phenomenal. No, not Principles. His current
new,
book,
the new one.
The new book about 500 years of the rise and fall of empires. And he says that the problem that you find with certain societies, or the society, people who lived between the Depression and World War II, did not enjoy the benefits of the boom that happened post-World War II because they had gone through a traumatic event. So they could not believe that life could change, that the great strides that were made in the 50s and 60s, the great boom. So a lot of them remained poor because their mindsets had not changed. And this is where the romantic ideals are very relevant in our society, because what it tells us is in the 1940s, in the 1930s, in a depression, when all hope is lost, you must cast your eyes to that ideal, no matter how romantic, and you go forth for it. And that human spirit is the reason why empires rise. And that missing is also the reason why
Countries are poor.
And they fell. So that's my take on it.
An interesting take, but maybe one I was going to say, even us who also were romanticizing about our ideas. I mean, Gutsarujinji. So pre-independence, you're looking at the scenario where all of a sudden the masses are enjoying the fruits of the liberation struggle, and land was a key issue. And now, how was that going to be resolved? I mean, you had promised people land. I mean, you are waging a whole war on the back of the promise that after the war, I mean, how are you going to then change that narrative? I think it's pretty much, it depends with the setting that you...
No, I can answer that quite easily. So if you actually read Marx and you go back to the ideas behind the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917, when it became the Soviet Union, they had, they had the most beautiful ideas about how everyone is going to be better off, because everybody is equal and there's no private property, everything will be shared. There's not going to be any, different classes. Everybody is going to share equally in the prosperity of the nation, right? And if you look at Mao's writings and Mao's ideals, on paper, the vision was utopian. But in reality, Stalin killed tens of millions of his own citizens, and Mao killed tens of millions, and the experiment failed miserably. So, in as much as it's important to start with a vision and ideals, it's not the case that all visions and ideals are created equal.
Well, I can actually extend the argument. There's a fundamental difference between being romantic and being delusional. So anyone who's had any relations with a woman can identify to when they're being romantic and when they're just selling a delusion or an illusion. But anyway, that's for another day.
Yeah, well, so
Marx, for avoidance of doubt, Marx was being delusional, creating a nirvana that everyone can be equal. I think being romantic means it's an ideal, and it's something that we can actually achieve
okay,
or work towards. That's what romanticism is, just means that it is an ideal, and idealism is romantic. And the philosophy behind it, there's something that we can strive towards, even though we fail, but it's certainly the North Star, and it's something that we can strive towards. So Guta Rujinji is being delusional by its very nature.
I don't think many people will agree with you on that one. But anyway, so I think earlier on, Tinashe, you spoke about the fact that we created our own problems. And and that obviously led us to failing to reach our full potential when you compare to the other former British colonies, Zambia and the US. But we're also creating our own solutions. The gold coin being one of them is touted as a solution, or partly a solution, to the need to preserve Zim dollar value from everyone else who is worried about the value erosion. What's your reaction to the gold coin as an asset class, and maybe is it something that you can trust, you can put your money in there?
Well, I think it's actually creating more problems than it is solving.
Okay.
And I will define it this way. When I say it's creating more problems than it is actually solving, is if you think about the problem in Zimbabwe, the problem in Zimbabwe is not lack of asset classes, right? The stock market, if you look at what's happening with the stock market, it has always been an asset class. And within that asset class, you do have gold companies, you do have all sorts of companies that have actually preserved value for a lot of... and when you look at the limitations of the stock market, and you guys can speak well to it, the limitations has been the derivative markets and all sorts of things that you could do with the stock market, where the authorities have always been quite adamant that you can't trade derivatives or even extend what you could do with the stock market or with the retail market or the commodities market. So introducing gold coins when we haven't even fully extended the potential of the stock market, to me just means that it's a ruse, it's a scam. There's something to it that we all don't see that they're aiming at, and we sort of understand what it is. The other second thing that I want to highlight is, why is the central bank not, why doesn't it believe in its own suggestions, in its own advice? Our central bank does not have gold reserves. In fact, it forward sold its gold reserves. You know that Afrexim Bank, all those loans were backed up by and guaranteed by commodities. That's what Mtuli told us 2 years ago, if you remember. Similarly with Trafigura, that Trafigura was giving us fuel on the back of gold, and that gold we've already oversold. So why are we now thinking that a local investor, and remember, a troy of gold,
a troy ounce,
it's 1,800, which is beyond what an individual can. So the idea in itself, where you're now using Zim dollars to buy gold, it's quite problematic, because the central bank does not have any gold, nor can it produce gold. Gold is produced by gold miners. And if we start the market where we're trading gold in Zim dollars, eventually it means the miner will be paid in Zim dollars. Now, people have forgotten that right now we produce about 30 tons of gold. But in 2008, we only produced 4 tons of gold officially, because the gold miners rejected the price that they were getting from the market. And we've seen this again in 2019 and 2020, when they were given Zim dollars and they rejected Zim dollars. So I want to know why or how the central bank is going to mitigate that. Because if they're selling in Zim dollars, even at the power market rate, it still defeats the purpose, because the gold miners were very clear. Right now, even if you offer them Zim dollars, that is at a premium to the power market, they will not accept it. Makorokoza will not accept a price that is in Zim dollars. Right now, if you have Zim dollars and you went to a gold mine, even if at a premium to the power market rate. So what I mean is, if you go to a gold miner, a Makorokoza, at a rate of 800, and you offer him RTGS, he will reject it.
So
They want US dollar cash.
What if it's a scenario where the central bank is sitting at the center, so you are buying gold coins using Zim dollars, but they will
I think you guys are getting lost in the weeds. There's something even more fundamental that we need to consider, which is, who is the issuer of the Zim dollar?
Central bank.
It's the central bank. What is the status from a credibility standpoint of the Zim dollar? The Zim dollar was issued with certain commitments and promises. How many of those commitments and promises has the issuer been faithful to? Okay,
none.
So this gold coin that's going to be minted, right? It comes with commitments and promises as well, that it contains X amount of gold, that it will be issued under Y circumstances, that these are the rules that will apply to this coin going forward, right? Who is the issuer of this coin? What is their track record in terms of commitments and promises? So why would anybody who is alive to this history with the Zim dollar think that because coins and RTGS are both currency?
Well, at the correct price, I would buy it.
No, but
then I will not put a premium to it. I will first recognize that it's not a gold coin. To me, it's just gold. So I will look at it and I will weigh it, and if I can buy the gold at a 50% discount, I will buy it.
Who would sell you gold at 50% discount?
That's exactly what they're doing. That's what they.
If it's being sold at official, then it's at a 50% discount.
And everybody will buy it.
No, but you see, if you were in Joburg,
and I will not consider it as a gold coin, I would just consider it as gold.
If you were in Joburg and you went into a place that sells Kruger rands, right, which is basically the South African equivalent of gold coins, and they told
many countries have,
and the merchant told you that it's got so many grams of gold, are you going to take that at face value, or you're going to want to test that?
I think in South Africa you would take it as at face value, but
exactly.
In Zimbabwe, I'm not going to take it as face value.
How many people in our country, ordinary citizens, have the capacity to appraise a gold coin? If they don't trust the issuer. If they say, okay, fine, you're saying it's got so many grams of gold in it, okay, fine. I actually don't trust you. I need to verify it. Who's got the capacity?
At the right price. It's how people invested in money counting machines, right? It's always at the right price. If you give me a 50% discount, I will invest in the technology.
You see, and also the other thing that you've got to be very much alive to is the fact that, because this has happened before in antiquity, right? Where, they issued coins and people trusted these coins. And then, the kings and emperors, the irresponsible ones, decided that instead of cutting spending because they didn't have enough gold, we can just add a little bit of...
No, you're quite right, but that's in the long term. But if on the 25th of July, right, if they give us gold coins, which I can verify that it's actually gold, right, a 22 karat gold, right, if I can just verify that, I don't care whether it's a coin or whatever. To me, as far as that's concerned, and it's trading at a discount of 1,800. And to me, my discount would be, even a 10% discount, I would buy it. But it's a Ponzi scheme, because the person we're actually prejudicing at the end of the day is the gold miner. Because eventually what's going to happen is the gold miner who was supposed to get 1,800 is not getting the 1,800. But as human beings right now, if they come onto the market and it's trading in Zim dollars and it's trading at a discount, there will be buyers. I can tell you that.
So, gentlemen,
although it's making the country worse off. As a country, we will be worse off. But as individuals, the individuals that will benefit. And I kid you not, that the day it comes out, if it comes out at a premium, then no one is going to buy it.
Okay, Tinashe.
But it has to come at a discount.
If you've got more to say about that, maybe let's take it to the second segment. I guess this is the right time for us to take a break, and we meet in the second segment.
Hangi apana kana chikafu.
Hey, indlala hey. Bazasibulala ngendlala wanhlaba.
Andikho wakubikile iko.
Asam.
Asabe.
Imukubike makabeji.
Ifuna usibulalisa ngendlala
Kwethe sekuru.
Bayeza bayenyarazo bayathatha imali. Bayabuya kathesi nje so.
Ngoyida kunyaraza. Wonke sekuru.
The Sawira Connect card, connecting you to an easier and more convenient way to receive your funeral grocery allowance. Wipe away delays. Say goodbye to payment interruptions with just one simple swipe, 24/7. The Sawira Connect card, made for your convenience. Anytime, anywhere. Access made easy. For more information, connect with us today.
And we are back. So Tinashe, before we went for break, you really had some very strong point to make about the gold coin and where you think it should trade.
Okay,
Maybe
so
you can do that right away.
do not look at it as the central bank, for the reasons that Rufaro has articulated, which I totally agree. Do not look at it as a gold coin. Look at it as gold, right? As an asset class, gold as an asset class. And I am saying that for it to have any demand whatsoever in Zimbabwe, because I can go directly and buy gold from the producer. And from the producer, you can buy gold today at 1,800 for the same amount of grams, right? So if the central bank, if the central bank is selling the same gold, it means it must sell it to the market at a discount for me to buy it from the central bank. For the reasons that Rufaro has articulated, that actually this issuer I don't trust. So if you're in the gold market, you know that there are certain dealers that you just don't trust. And then there are certain dealers that you know, okay, I will buy their gold because I believe what this guy is saying. But if you're in that industry, you know they move around with this scales and they can tell what the weight is and that sort of thing, right? So a reserve bank, because it's distrusted, it must issue its gold at a discount for people to buy it.
But Tinache, it's gold. Why do you want it issued?
Because I don't trust the issuer.
But you don't have to trust the issuer. This is a coin, and you can take physical delivery of it. So as long as you can verify that it's 22
But how many people
carats,
have the capacity to do that?
well, it's not like it's going to be sold in the street. So maybe you have to go to the bank. They must have a way of actually ascertaining the quality of gold on the coin.
So okay, so let me give you the other complication which you may not understand in the gold industry is buying gold from Reserve Bank comes with the extra scrutiny of tax and money, where your money is coming from and where it's going and all sorts of things. Whereas buying gold from the market doesn't come with that overview, right? And that is the reason why I'm saying that the central bank, because the issuer is distrusted, it must come at a discount, which is making the country worse off. It doesn't make the individual worse off, because individuals are going to buy this gold at a discount. And like I said, even at 10% discount, right? Up until the Reserve Bank, people can trust the Reserve Bank that actually, you know what, if you buy gold from that guy, it's coming in at the
It is what it says
it is what it is. So I think that it has to come at a discount. And because it has to come at a discount, that's the only way it can then stimulate that demand. But it coming at a discount is actually a disadvantage to society. Because the gold miners, 70% of their costs are imported. All the chemicals, everything is actually imported. So the gold miner expects US dollar that can buy chemicals from offshore. So if the central bank is selling in Zim dollars, the gold miner cannot do anything with Zim dollars. But like I said, so I want to, let me emphasize the point so that it's very clear for everybody. What I'm saying is, as a country, this is one of those harebrained ideas that we've come up with, like bond notes, right? But as individuals, right, there will be an opportunity to arbitrage, for arbitrage. And the arbitrage is these RBZ gold must come at a discount, or in Zim dollars at a discount, and somebody will arbitrage.
But Tinashe, I think for a very long time there's been some sort of an outcry that Zim produces a lot of gold, 30 tons recently in the last year, but there was no way of an ordinary investor or citizen getting access to it directly. And even on the stock market right now, there's actually no meaningful gold mining company like on the ZFN. Okay, there's Real Gold, but it depends. Real Zim.
There's Padenga.
Then Padenga is not a pure play because I think half of the business is crocodile. So this is actually an opportunity to give access to everyone.
Who has been clamoring for this access? That
I think institutions would love that, and the fact that we actually are seeing a certain group of buy side or buyers on the stock market who are not like your long-term investors, but they are just coming to preserve the value of the Zimbabwe dollar. Don't you think that those individuals or corporates would actually find the gold coin more attractive? Because as long as
it's not gold coin, and for that reason, they just look at it as gold, and if it comes as a discount, then yes. But if they're paying Zim dollars, eventually the gold miner has to start accepting Zim dollars.
Okay, interesting. Maybe let's move on to the next.
Right, that's the problem. So you're right as far as it will stimulate demand from pension funds. But if pension funds start buying gold in Zim dollars, eventually the supply side will not have the gold because they won't accept Zim dollars. The gold miner does not want Zim dollars. Today, even at a premium, the gold miner will not accept Zim dollars. So what you would just see is a shortage of gold on the market. Okay. But there will be winners, those that come in early and can see the arbitrage opportunity, because once you've bought the gold, it's gold. I think the worry, like what Rufaro is saying, is the terms in which you buy this gold, are they always going to be true forever? Because you could come and those gold contracts could be cancelled. 6 months down the lane, they can cancel that gold contract. So there is that risk that you have to get around. But I think that as a country, our biggest problem is we're not addressing the supply side. And the supply side is gold miners. And gold miners are very emphatic. All they accept is US dollar cash.
No. But I think actually what we're not addressing is the primary fundamental problem. Why are people not comfortable holding Zim dollars? Right?
You're right.
Because everywhere else in the world, with a stable currency, people are quite happy to earn in that currency and keep their money in a bank,
store their value in
and not worry that they'll be able to buy less in 30 days or 90 days. Okay? So I actually think this is a distraction from the fundamental problem, which is printing, which is the debasement of the Zim dollar. Why not actually fix that? Why come up with other currencies or ideas for people to, again, and they're undermining their own currency because they're encouraging people to exit Zim dollars. They're saying the Zim dollar as a store of value today has failed miserably, and you know what? We're not going to fix that anytime soon. So here's a coin. That's the worst kind of message. If you're an issue of currency, right? You're basically undermining that currency. Why would you do that?
But are they not being pragmatic?
Fix the currency.
We all agree that you can't fix the Zim dollar. It's not going to happen now, maybe in the next 24 months. So this is some sort of...
so you're actually saying they will make it worse? Because you see, the other question that hasn't been answered is what will stop the Reserve Bank from printing its own money to buy the gold?
They'll be the biggest buyer of these coins.
I think let's leave the gold coin issue before we get into serious problems there. So the other issue that gentlemen need to discuss is we are seeing a disappearance of commodities on the shelves. This week, actually, there were quite a number of pictures on social media where quite a number of the basics, you're not finding them in the mainstream shops, and I think quite a number of people are now resorting to going to the matak shops downtown and all, where you can buy commodities in US dollars, and even some of the big retail shops. They actually demarcating. There are certain products that are now being sold exclusively in US dollars, because that's the instruction that's coming from the supplier, who is finding very difficult to get foreign currency from the auction. Is it something that we should be worried about? Is it a
No, absolutely. Remember,
we actually had a kind of a preview to this discussion in the last episode, where you were lamenting how the fixed exchange rate is a price control, and wherever you have price controls, you're going to have shortages. So obviously, there's a shortage of currency at the official rate at the auction. But basically, there was a wealth transfer from exporters to importers, and the importers were getting as much currency as they needed to keep the shop shelves full. But obviously, that shortage is getting worse at the auction. So the importers who are supplying the supermarkets are not getting enough currency at this ridiculous rate, so they can't import the product. That's why it's not there. But if you're buying it on the street from somebody who's selling it to you in US dollars, it's always going to be there. What you were saying, that this shortage is going to, from the auction, it's actually going to start infecting importers, and that's what's
remember it was a price control. The willing buyer, willing seller is effectively a price control. Not just that, the central bank then came up with a rule, Ministry of Finance came up with a rule that if you break that price control, there's a fine of up to 20 million Zim dollars. So you tend to find that now manufacturers are just saying, you know what, we'll only supply you a product if it's in US dollars. And then the retailer realizes, you know what, I'll sell my product in US dollars so that I get my supplies. But more fundamental than that is what's actually happening in our real economy versus our informal economy. When you look at the informal economy, the US dollar cash is there, right? And it's freely flowing. How you see retailers like, okay, declaring a dividend, most of that was actually coming from US dollar cash, right? So companies or retailers are realizing that, you know what, let's just deal with the reality. And the reality is there's US dollar cash. So for certain products, they're just saying, you know what, let's just deal with US dollar cash, because they know that the market is there. And if they don't do it, someone else will fill in the gap. And it's the informal tuck shops. They will easily fill in that gap, and they will swipe all the US dollar cash that's out there on the market. This is a signal to government. And one would have hoped that government would respond to this. But unfortunately, they will respond with more threats rather than actually accepting the reality that our market is cash dollarizing.
I'll push back on that a little bit, because I think there's precedent in our market. For years, if not decades, the government was engaged in the idea that they could sell fuel at a discount to fair value. And throughout that era, there were fuel queues, there were fuel shortages, there was all sorts of hana around fuel, until somewhere along the line the penny dropped, and we decided that we should just sell fuel in hard currency, because it's 100% imported, and we will have none of these headaches if fuel is sold in US dollars. And fuel is one of our biggest import items.
I can tell you the reason why fuel was easier to dollarize than anything else.
Okay, so with the rest of these imported items, the ticket sizes were smaller, and they thought, you know what, we can allocate to importers at auction, and this is sustainable. And clearly it's not. And finally, what we're seeing on shop shelves today is the chickens coming home to roost. We've been doing this thing of transferring value from exporters to importers, and it was never sustainable when we started the auction. and now it's reaching its natural conclusion, where these things that are on shop shelves at auction prices disappear.
I think that the fuel industry, why it worked so well, is because I think close to 40% or 50% is tax. So government revenue actually comes from fuel tax. If you think about it, in a good year, we are importing about 1.4 billion worth of fuel, right? Or the total's about 1.4, and or we consume 1.4, and closer to 600, 700 million of it is tax. So it's a way in which government was actually collecting taxes, which are extremely important, because we only collect about 3 to 3.5. In a good year, it's 3.5 billion, but otherwise it's actually $3 billion US. And if you're collecting 700 million from fuel, that's the incentive for fuel.
No, but that incentive is applicable across the economy.
No other product has such a high tax rate. That's the issue, right? So you get conflicting statements there, because the politicians would love, because the greater population eats maize meal, sugar. Those are the basic commodities that they consume, and government would want those products to be freely available to as many people as possible. So those are the contradictions that we have in our government, that they will not allow the market, because they know that if they allow the market, then it exposes the critical thing that we're overprinting. If they allow the market, because if they allow the market, then the price for commodity will adjust for the amount of printing that they're doing, will adjust for inflation. They don't want that for obvious reasons. And when you're going towards an election like this, I think you shouldn't expect them to allow the market to be. If they allow the market to be, then it's full dollarization. I don't think that that's their intention. They'll be forced to a dollarized economy, but that's not what they would want. They would rather not have that, because then it takes away the...
No, look, I understand your reasoning, but I think that for argument's sake, if we had a completely 100% dollar economy, we would actually experience economic growth. Government would actually be able to raise money on global capital markets, and those things that they want to subsidize, they could probably be in a better position to subsidize them. If they wanted to subsidize mealie meal, cooking oil, sugar, the things that are consumed by the masses, they would actually have a bigger budget for that subsidy. But by printing to make, or by doing this wealth transfer from exporters to importers, right? At some point, the exporters are just going to
reduce. You're quite right.
Export less, and
it's already started to happen.
And you're going to see shortages on the shelves, and so those people who could only afford those commodities in Zim dollars from the supermarket, the only alternative is the tuck shops you're talking about, and they can't afford the product there because they don't earn US dollars. So politically, you're actually worse off and less likely to get that vote.
So do you know what it means when we say that Zimbabwe has got the highest inflation rate in the world? 400%. Do you know what it actually means? It means that we are overspending more than anyone else in the world compared to our revenues. So even if you fully dollarize the economy and the economy grows, you're looking at around 3.5 billion worth of revenue.
Well, during the GNU, it was 4 billion.
No, that's the 3.5. The highest we've ever collected was actually about $3.5 billion. But yeah, you could argue that it can be 4 billion. I can accept that argument. But our expenditure has always been double that. When you consider all the subsidies, when you consider everything that happens in this economy, you tend to find that we spend 7 billion and we collect 3.5 on average, right? And that 3.5 billion is our problem, because that's where the wealth transfer comes in, that's where inflation comes in, that's where all the subsidies come in. So our big problem is our insatiable need to spend. And this is how I look at it, is if you think about it, in 1990, we were a bigger economy to Kenya. But it also meant that we were spending more than Kenya, because we were earning more than Kenya. our revenues, our ZIMRA revenues, our tax revenues were way higher than Kenya. But what has happened is over a 30-year period, Kenya is now 5 times bigger, now 6 times bigger than Zimbabwe. But do you think our appetite and our expenditures have reduced substantially? They haven't. We are more or less, we want to spend more or less like Kenya. And yet we are a 6 times smaller economy. That's our big problem. Unless we solve that, and it's a paradigm shift where you just accept things as they are, that unfortunately, gents and ladies, our economy is far smaller than Kenya. I understand that our appetite and our need to spend, especially from the socialist 80s, was huge and insatiable. Remember Hesiod and the issue of scarcity. We haven't solved that. That's our quagmire, that we haven't solved a very simple equation, that our appetites are still at 1990 levels. And yet the reality is we have an economy that's now 6 times smaller than Kenya. Yet we spend more or less like Kenya.
Well,
Solve that, you solve a lot of our problems.
Interesting views that you're sharing there. Let's take another break, and we'll come and deal with some other issues that we have on the agenda. So see you in the next segment.
At a funeral in the rural areas, there is a lot of work to be done. Fetching water, firewood, stones, bricks, and other things to save for Tonde. Tonde is sitting down where the elders are sitting. The young men are not happy with this because Tonde is the only one who knows everything that needs to be done, as the mourners wait for the body of the deceased that is still to come to the rural home. The elders are keeping him close and constantly consulting him.
Listen, Zingai. You see, among all these old men, nobody knows how your late brother's funeral policy works. Tonde here is a friend who works at Nyarazo. The friend is helping us with all the information, so we need Tonde close to us. You should be thanking Tonde because everything is circuitika nyore.
Nenio Sekun, I just remembered that I have a friend at Nyarazo. Maybe I can help if Tonde can't find his phone.
Introducing Sawi, the chatbot from Nyarazo. Speak to Sawi for all your queries and inquiries. The benefits of having Sawi by your side are endless. When you need to know about our policy, Nyarazo products, payment platforms, claims, the Sawira International Plan, where to find the Nyarazo branches, Nyarazo contact details, how to apply, and any questions you may have. And she can help you find who you want to speak to. For your convenience, you can ask about anything, from our funeral services, counseling to your payments, and much more. Experience the benefit of having Sawi by your side. App Sawi today on WhatsApp number 0712 992 892. Nyarazo, Sawira Mukuru, Omgane Omkulu.
We are back for the final segment of this episode. On this segment, gentlemen, let's talk about developments on the capital markets. I think before the show today, we had a side show, some discussion, the three of us, about the valuations of the market at the present moment and where the market was probably in the last 6 months. So just looking at the statistics as of the 5th of July, using a rate of $680 against the USD, which is quite generous considering that the rate
is 730, 740, 750.
The market capitalization for the entire Zimbabwe Stock Exchange is sitting at 3.4 billion. To put it into perspective, it was 6.7 billion at the end of 2021. And I think, in fact, I know this year the market cap actually had gone above 8 billion. And maybe the question that one would ask is it the correction that you'd expect? Is the market correctly valued at the moment?
I must say, a caveat is Rufaro never believed the market when it was at 10 billion. He was the only guy I know who kept on saying sell, sell, sell.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe let's start off with you.
Look, I think I wouldn't call it a correction. I think what's happened really is that the reduction is not a function of a change in the fundamentals of your deltas, OKs, and other listed counters. What it is a change in perception from a certain segment of the market that from time to time was very rich, gets very rich in Zim dollars, and has the problem of ring fencing those Zim dollars from the vagaries of inflation and devaluation. So for a lot of reasons, the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange was a great destination for such Zim dollars. From a ticket size perspective, it's better than property because you can't buy $2,000 worth of property or $5,000 worth of property. The minimum is quite high, and at any given time, even if you have a lot of money, you might actually not be able to find a property that matches that value. Whereas on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, you could buy the equivalent of $5 worth of Delta. If you had $500,000 worth, you could also park it in Delta shares or in OK or INSCO or any of these stocks. And in 30 days or 60 days, if you needed Zim dollar liquidity, even though the prices have changed because of inflation, the prices of those shares would also have changed in line with inflation, and you could readily sell whatever Zim dollar amount was your requirement to fund that bill. But what happened, unfortunately, 3-4 weeks ago, is there were some policy announcements that rattled those type of investors. So initially, the announcement was that there's going to be a 40% withholding tax on profits, not withholding tax, sorry, capital gains tax on profits on listed securities. And so this rattled these investors, So even though the 40% didn't actually materialize, eventually they changed the withholding capital gains tax from 2% to 3%. Mm-hmm. What it made alive in the minds of this cohort of investor is that the regulatory risk on the ZSE is high. You can park some value on the ZSE, wake up one day, and there's a surprise announcement, which means you can't sell your shares at the price you hoped to sell them for, and you'll have all kinds of issues. So there's a cohort of Zim dollar investors who are no longer allocating their money to the ZSE. So, and pricing valuation, it's a supply and demand game, right? So if you make a material adjustment to demand, which is what I believe has happened, that there's this cohort of Zim dollar investors who are no longer comfortable.
So what are they doing with their money?
So they are buying currency on the parallel market.
But they're not allowed to buy currency.
Yeah, they're not allowed to. That doesn't.
So what are you saying?
Maybe I think just a little distinction there. So there are institutions, like your typical institutional investors. So much as they may want to buy currency, those ones they can't, obviously because of corporate governance issues and whatever. But then, like what Rufaro is saying, I think over the last 24 months, we actually saw a crop of stock market participants. I wouldn't want to call them investors in that way. But these are not like investing. These are guys who are just parking their money. So they're getting Zim dollar cash flows from their hustle. And they bring, because they're worried.
So they're now crystallizing.
Yes. So these guys have always had an option to play other markets, obviously, to the extent that they can do it without being in the crosshairs of the FIU. So I guess those are the people that you're talking about. And in the earlier segment, those are the people that I thought maybe they would find the coin very attractive. Anyway, let's not reopen the coin debate.
But then those same people can buy gold directly.
I don't think it's possible unless you do it in a clandestine way.
No. But
And we don't want to believe that
we just need to be alive to reality. So the parallel market is illegal. Okay, you're not allowed to trade currency at rates other than the official through official channels, right?
Like what we do here, we don't play there.
But the reality on the ground is that there is a huge parallel market out there, okay? And it actually sets the prices for a lot of things in the economy, which is why the government actually cares about the parallel market rate. Because if you think about it, okay, if everybody could buy as much currency as they wanted at the official rate, the parallel market would be irrelevant, okay? Nobody would care about it. It could be there trading at 700, 800, whatever, right? But we would know for a fact that all the traders in that market are criminals, right? They're not trading there because they can't access the currency through any other channel. They're trading there because what they're doing is patently criminal, right? But in Zimbabwe, it's one of those scenarios. I don't know who to attribute the code to, but it's applicable here. You know, bad laws make good people criminals, and we live in such a legal framework where, you know, ordinary people who are not given to committing crime in the ordinary course of their lives find themselves in a situation where they, from time to time, trade on the parallel market. Right.
So anyway, we'll go to the issue of the parallel market and the rate maybe as we come to the close of the segment. But I think still on the stock market. So what are we saying? Are we saying 3.5 billion is the correct position, especially if those investors who have got options to play other markets finding the market to be heavily regulated to a point where maybe you're not going to make money out of it?
So it's not so much that the market is heavily regulated. I think, you know, stock markets everywhere generally are very heavily regulated in terms of what they can and can't do, and the oversight is quite intense. Okay. That's not the issue here, right? The regulatory risk is not that there's a lot of regulation. The regulatory risk is that you don't know what the regulations are going to look like in 30 days or 60 days. So if you're trading on the New York Stock Exchange or the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, everybody, all the players in that ecosystem are heavily regulated. But you know what the rules are, and you can predict with high conviction what the rules are going to be in 3 years,
so you're saying,
in 5 years.
We don't know what's going to happen.
You don't know, because you could buy Delta shares with your savings, or, you know, because in 60 days, you have a Zim dollar obligation that you want to expunge through Delta sales, right? And your reasoning is that, look, I think whatever happens with inflation, the share price is going to keep up, okay? But the regulatory risk in our market is such that you don't know what the taxes are going to be when you sell in 60 days, because there could be a surprise announcement that actually, you know, we don't like speculators, so if you buy shares today, you have to wait 180 days to sell. Look, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that from what we've seen in terms of the policy actions around our market, sadly, you know, it's not impossible, right? So if you know, these sort of things don't happen in other markets, but they happen here, right? People bought Old Mutual in good faith, and they woke up one day and they can't trade their shares, and it's,
is there no over-the-counter trades of
those are illegal. Just like the parallel, right? So you know, people bought these shares in good faith, and now they can't trade them, right? So that regulatory risk, you know, and it's a perception, right? Maybe it might turn out to be the case that for the next 10 years, there aren't going to be any policy changes around the ZSE, right? I don't know that. Okay, but the perception is real, and the perception, you know, in markets, there's that expression, perception is reality. This money that used to flow to the ZSE is just not flowing there anymore.
But what do you say to this argument that actually in June, when the market was actually coming down, the market actually received more dollars, more Zim dollars, than at any given point during the year.
They're Zim dollars. So in nominal Zim dollar terms, every month it receives
it's more because of
record.
inflation.
it receives record amounts of Zim dollars, but which is why
it's just
he's
inflation.
talking about.
All right.
So that valuation is not as in. If you look at it in Zim dollars, market is doing
Yeah,
phenomenally
the
well.
market has actually more than doubled in Zim dollar terms.
Year to date,
Year to date.
it's been a fantastic year.
Yeah. So,
But what has happened to the value of the Zim dollar? Where did we? Where did we start the year? Where is it now?
Where is it now? Yeah.
And what's the outlook? That's the other thing that shapes valuations.
Markets,
Is
okay.
perception, right? Where do you think the rate is going to be in 30 days, in 90 days, year end, right? So at the beginning of the year, the rate didn't move so aggressively. So the forward pricing was benign, which brings up another issue of this idea. Again, why, if you are planning on making the Zim dollar stable, would you have a plan for forward pricing the Zim dollar? So the issue of the Zim dollar is telling us this thing is going to devalue going forward. We're not going to rein in inflation. That's not part of the plan. And that's very
worrying,
disturbing.
and they're offering you some life jackets in form of the gold coin. Guys, this ship is what is going under. Okay, so
and they're selling life jackets in Zim dollars.
You can't make this up. You can't make this up. It reminds me of something that happened a couple of weeks ago. This European airline Ryanair, right? It in its infinite wisdom, so it decided that to verify that you are a South African, if you're traveling on a South African passport, you needed it in Afrikaans.
Wow.
Yeah. So Linda told me this, right? And my initial reaction was, this must be fake news, or it's a joke, And then I went on to BBC, the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and it was a thing, right? And I was struggling to wrap this around my brain. I can understand somebody at Ryanair in compliance sitting there thinking, because just to give you a little bit of context, the airlines in Europe have a problem with fake South African passports.
South African passports.
And if the authorities find that you've flown somebody on a fake passport, you get quite a heavy fine, right? So they were having this problem with a lot of South African passports. And so somebody in compliance was obviously thinking about this problem and had
just Googled.
just had an epiphany where they thought, you know what?
No,
there's this language called Afrikaans, right? Now, I can imagine one guy or woman who hasn't had a lot of exposure to South Africa thinking, it's a good idea to do this thing, right? But for it to become a company-wide policy that they practice across Europe, I suspect there must have been like a meeting with like 5, 6, 7 people where they decided, okay, this is what we want to do, right? And I can't imagine that nobody thought, you know what, let's call the South African Ministry of Home Affairs, just ask them, what would this be a good way to screen South Africans, Or let's talk to someone who's South African that we know and ask them, do you think this is a clever way to screen South Africa? But none of this happened. They had this meeting, they said, this is a fantastic idea. And instead of choosing to say, look, what's a tiny airport somewhere with not so much traffic, let's do a test run for like a week and see if there's, and assess the feedback. No, they didn't do that. They just made it policy across Europe. And you had all these people who can't speak Afrikaans, being told, listen, you're not getting onto this plane unless you pass this Afrikaans test. And, the blowback was huge. And this is, sometimes when I hear policy announcements in Zim, this is the same incredulity I suffer, like with this gold coin. Did they, when they sat around the table and decided, look, this is a good idea, we need to introduce gold coins. Did anybody say, you know what, there's a whole bunch of capital market players in our country who are in the business of investments. Maybe we should call one of them, find out what they think. They might have some pointers. Maybe we make a bunch of adjustments here and there, so that it's not so shocking. when it's announced.
But what are the chances that maybe this thing was not like discussed on a round table? It was just some thought of someone out there smart who just saw some way of making money, and then they just lobbied it.
Most probably.
Yeah, they just lobbied it through some powerful people and say, guys, you know what? We can make some money. Because it really doesn't solve
you see,
any of the problems that we
in fact, I would go even further, that what captures the mind, it's stemming from Russia. The idea that Russia is selling all its oil and resources in the ruble, that somebody...
You mean the ruble?
Yeah. That somebody thought it was a wise idea that actually, you know what, let's sell our gold in Zim dollars, because that will make the Zim dollar even more attractive. What they don't understand is that Russia has almost 2 years cover, import cover. That's number one. But also in Zimbabwe, what's to stop the central bank from printing Zim dollars and buying the gold?
Nothing.
Or somebody printing Zim dollar and buying the gold.
Well, only one institution can print Zim dollars.
Well, no, yes, effectively. But there is a way in which you can print money through government, which is your invoices. Because what's happening now is you just supply government, and government now will pay you in Zim dollars, and you use those Zim dollars to buy the gold.
I've got an answer for you.
Yeah.
Our central bank is quite honorable. They won't do. They won't engage in any. They won't do such a thing. And in fact, the FIU is actually housed at the RBZ. I'm sure they'll be. Those are the kind of things that they'll be looking at, and they'll not allow the central bank to even try any of that. So
well, look, if you change careers, Ranga, I think you'll do very well in comedy.
Guys, so we have come to the end of this show. And we hope you have enjoyed it. And maybe just as a challenge, as you're watching this show on a Friday, would you care to just take a 30-second video and let's see what you're drinking as you're watching the Friday Drinks show for this week?
Only if it's not boring.
I don't know, by his definition, what is boring. But yeah, we just want to see your drink of choice that you enjoy as you're watching the show. And please remember to comment, like our Facebook page, ZFN Capital, and also engage us on social media platform, on Twitter, and also on Facebook. Otherwise, have a pleasant weekend and see you next time.